he burst onto our TV screens like a comet, and his light burned brightly for a while, until the darkness overtook him. John Belushi on Biography, as Make 'em Laugh Week continues now on A&E.
I'm Jack Perkins, and this is Biography. On March 5th, 1982, John Belushi, the actor-comedian, died in Los Angeles at the age of 33. He was fairly youthful still, but he'd already become a major media star. There were hit records, hit movies, hit television shows. Belushi had worn a number of different faces. We remember him as a killer bee, a samurai warrior, as Joliet Jake of the Blues Brothers, and as the biggest animal in Animal House. But in spite of all those wonderful characters he had portrayed, it did seem for quite a while that the furor surrounding his death could overshadow all that he had accomplished. Well, it is a fact, unarguable, that John Belushi was a man who could make people laugh. Join us now on Biography for the story of John Belushi, told by those who knew him best.
I grew up after John had already passed, but just like many of you, I saw his movies on TV all the time. The local NBC here ran reruns of Saturday Night Live, so I got to see everything he ever did. In 1994, A&E Biography did their edition on John Belushi here, was to interview everybody who deserves, to be on a John Belushi biography, and they do a really good job at not looking at the comedian, but the man. It's a really good piece, and I hope you all enjoy it.
Really knew exactly what he wanted to do. And he tried to understand every medium he was in and do what was right.
He chose very carefully his friends, and to those friends he was good,
John always showed up unannounced. Whether it was to do anything or just sit and talk, or he wanted to swim, or he wanted to, to take a sauna or something, he always showed up unannounced.
He had an uncanny ability to become instantly intimate with people.
John would make exciting things happen, which no one else can do. He would just swoop me up and against my will force me to do things that would be fun.
In the years following John Belushi's death, his wife, Judith Jacqueline Belushi, videotaped a series of private conversations with John's friends, colleagues, and family. She wanted to preserve for posterity a sense of John's art and life while the memories were still fresh. Conducted in 1985 and 1986, these conversations give extraordinary insight into the creative genius of a man who affected his times, but could not outlive them.
He came from a real interesting time when, when theater was, people didn't even really know what theater was. There was rock and roll, but there wasn't really any kind of theater or comic theater, or it was kind of a slow period anyway of comic theater, and certainly not comic television. Was a completely different animal than it is now. And the first times I saw him on the stage, it was really like there was a whole new idea, it really was a whole new idea.
In the first place, he was the absolute symbol of his generation. These people who grew up in those times, the Vietnam War and everything else that happened, had a certain kind of attitude toward life and a certain kind of cynicism, or irony at least, that he certainly exemplified.
I do remember his audition fairly vividly, because we'd had a meeting beforehand and we'd talked, and then he came in and did his audition as Toshiro Mifune. as the samurai.
It would be convenient to say that John Belushi was always John Belushi, but it's true. Born in 1949 in Humboldt Park, then a largely Albanian section of Chicago, John discovers at an early age that the camera is one of his friends.
It was a nice neighborhood. The kids played together, a lot of Albanian kids that, families had children his age. And he was just like a little man. He just took care of himself. He talked to this one woman in the building next door. She says, I never saw such a child that he was like 5 years old, and he talked like he was like about 10 years old, she said to him. That's what she said to me. He just talked to the older women, to anybody. He was just very mature for his age.
He was very dark as a kid, and they used to call him Pancho. And he took me through the neighborhood and showed me where we used to live, and the alleys he used to sneak down and run around, and he showed me the pool that he said he had the privilege of sneaking in during all the hours. They had certain hours for swimming for adults, swimming for girls, and he would climb over the fence and all the lifeguards, and oh, there's Pancho, let him go swimming, So he was very well liked in the neighborhood.
When John is 6, the Belushis move to Wheaton, a starchy suburb of Chicago. Here, John, his older sister Marion, and younger brothers Jim and Billy find their surroundings less cramped than Humboldt Park. The warm presence of their mother Agnes and grandmother Nina is a notable contrast to the frequent absence of their father Adam, who spends his weeks in the city running restaurants. Weekends, however, are joyous family affairs.
Man, their home movies look really good. I mean, don't they? I assume that's an 8mm camera. Just guessing. But they look really darn good. Makes you wonder what else the Belushi family has.
When it comes time to blend in, however, Wheaton is farther from Chicago than shows up on maps. John's Albanian heritage makes him seem alien to his waspy classmates.
Everybody looked at him like he was kind of from outer space, and because he had dark hair, and I think he was probably beginning to grow a beard at that time already. So everybody kind of strayed away from him, but because of his class, clownish demeanor, he won friends very easily.
In high school, he was on the football team, too. I used to call him Killer because he was like, he played with all his heart and soul. He loved that football.
John was a middle linebacker. He was a co-captain of the team. He was kind of short, but he was the toughest middle linebacker I think Wheaton ever had. I used to love watching the game and hearing over loudspeaker, Belushi in on a tackle, Belushi in on a tackle.
We were on bleachers at a football game, and some guy called me a name, and John heard him, and he got really mad, and he grabbed the guy, and he hit him. The guy fell all the way down the bleachers, and then we ran down there because I was really upset over that. I go, "What'd you do that for?" And he just, forget it, no one talks to you like that, So I went down there, and this guy's laying there. So I picked up his head to see if he was all right, and they called the ambulance and stuff. And John goes, "You apologize to my sister right now." The guy's laying there bleeding, and he made him apologize to me, and he did. I'll never forget that. I was so embarrassed.
John also becomes interested in acting and comedy.
It was just amazing to see the transformation because he took it so seriously. And, at that time we felt that, we were Hollywood movie stars. And to me, looking back on it, it's so ironic that all of the stage stuff, and we did a lot of comedy too that was improvisational at that time. And I think it's real interesting to look back and see how things evolved.
He'd do impressions of everybody. That was the big thing. He'd do impressions of my father. He'd do impressions of my uncle, of everyone in the family. I think that's where he started his imitations, He had a real knack for mimicking. He could mimic anybody.
Would he do them in the presence of the people that he was mimicking?
No, in front of my father? No. No. Of course, he could probably do it right to my father's face, and my father wouldn't even know it. You know, he wouldn't even have known it. No, I wouldn't do that.
He had just begun to do some acting. Now, Juanita and I had worked in summer stock. I talked to John quite a bit about it, and I took him into Chicago to try out. And they said, well, all right, because he was a friend of mine. He said he would take him in and let him try out with these adults. But I had to wait in the car. They didn't want me to prompt him or anything, so I brought him down. I took him in the house with a whole bunch of people. I waited in the car, and then about a half an hour later, somebody came out and got me, and here John was entertaining the whole group. He was doing bits, and you know, and they wanted him on the spot.
John appears in 7 plays in 7 weeks at the Shawnee Summer Theater. At 18, he's the youngest actor they've ever hired. Despite the opportunity, he's eager to return home at summer's end. He has a girlfriend. Her name is Judy Jacklin.
Biography will continue in a moment here on A&E.
You never really know.
We were over across the street from my parents' house at Herrick Lake. And once again, I was with my group of girlfriends, and he was with a group of guys. And we were playing, we were having a water fight. And in his enthusiasm, I was in the same boat with John. He came back like this to go through, and he hit me. I was behind him, and he hit me. And that was actually when he started phoning me. So he phoned me and said, how's your arm? That went on for a couple weeks.
I remember going with Judy and Les to John's father's restaurant, and I've always wondered how we happened to pick that particular restaurant. We wonder if Judy had anything to do with that, because John was a busboy, the most elegantly handsome young character I ever saw in my life, and there was a lot of tension. Judy and John were sort of not looking at each other and looking at each other, and we had the impression that John was horribly embarrassed.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, that was the very first time I can ever remember seeing him, and Judy sort of eased him in, like saying, I have a friend that's on the football team.
And very much he wanted to be a football player, and he, in fact, had a scholarship to Illinois Wesleyan for both football and acting, which was pretty much his dream and what he wanted to do, and he had intended to do that. But interestingly, they had arranged to give him a job where he'd get some money. Everything was fine, but he was not accepted at the school. Somehow this all happened, and then he found out he wasn't accepted, and it sort of broke his football plans because he'd passed up his other scholarships along the way. Perhaps an interesting, quirk of fate.
Yet more than fate moves the rest of America in the late 60s. The Vietnam War is raging, and every draft-eligible male is being sucked into its vortex. Student activism becomes a way of life. In nearby Chicago, in the summer of 1968, the Democratic Party convention ignites a storm of anti-war protest, and police respond with tear gas. John is among those who are gassed. John, whose politics are already liberal, now realizes he's not alone. At school, he makes 2 friends who feel the same way, about politics and comedy.
John wanted to form a comedy trio. We called ourselves the West Compass Players. The Compass Players were an improvisational theater group formed in Chicago by Paul Sills and many famous improvisational actors. And we called ourselves the West Compass Players because we grew up in the western suburbs. Perhaps a little pretentious of us, but we were young.
John found this coffee house on the corner of Carpenter and Polk and talked to the guy and won his confidence over. They were serving, I think, 12 or 15 kinds of exotic teas there on Friday and Saturday nights. And John proposed the idea to them that we'd come in there and do shows on Friday and Saturday nights.
The West Compass Players got their material from the newspaper, from the street, and from going to the Second City Theater and trying to steal a Second City material.
And so I thought, well, maybe it's better to have them audition and know what they're stealing than let them go on. And of course they came up, and of course John blew me away immediately. I think he's the only actor, and in fact I know he's the only actor we ever auditioned, whom I not only fell in love with immediately, but immediately put into the main company.
My name is Craig Baker. I'm in your Mystery 2 class. I seem to have missed your final exam.
Yes, you did. In fact, you attended the first 2 classes and then missed the rest of the term.
Well, I'm here to explain that, sir. See, I was working part-time after school in the steel mills, and some molten steel splashed on my leg. And while I was in the hospital, I got acute intestinal flu. And rheumatic fever just popped up right after that.
When he was on stage, there was nobody else on stage. He had a magnetism. Very few people have this. I call it in the manner born. I mean, he was just born to do that. You know, there are a lot of rules that we teach in improvisation. John broke all the rules, didn't make any difference. I mean, the audience just wanted more of him.
Too bad there isn't more video of John on stage, because from what I have heard, he was even better on stage than on TV or film.
He'd take care of the actors. He was out for the show and for the people who were in it, and he would really try for us. And he was a main force of that company, not because of his talent, because his talent was big and filled up the theater like that, but also because he cared about the whole show and about the people in it.
I personally think that he changed Second City. You know, I mean, because all they used to talk about is Descartes and Kant and philosophy and, you know, moral dilemma and will and, you know, intellectual concepts. And John would come in there and play this hippie off the street who's lost his memory from smoking too much pot, and the audience would go nuts.
One Second City character wins John particular notoriety.
John did this incredible Joe Cocker impression. I guess he'd been practicing at home and in the car and in the shower, whatever. And he went on to become the most famous Joe Cocker impersonator since Joe Cocker himself.
Well, I'm standing here, singing my song. Well, there ain't nothing to do, that all my friends are gone.
John's Joe Cocker impression draws the notice of the National Lampoon. The nothing sacred extension of the Harvard Humor magazine has decided to produce an off-Broadway satire of Woodstock. It's called Lemmings, and there are to be no stars. John Belushi will change that.
Biography will continue in a moment here on A&E.
Come on, hold it down. Okay, first of all, I'd like to welcome you to the Woodchuck Memorial Festival of Peace, Love, and Death.
We moved to New York in 1972, very end of the year. Moved from Second City into a show called Lemmings for National Lampoon. It's supposed to be, lemmings are little animals that when they get overpopulated, they just run and jump over cliffs. And that was sort of the idea of this festival, was that we were overpopulated and needed to thin ourselves out.
Hey! Chevy! Hey, Richard! John! Hey, old buddy, man! Oh, it's been such a God. 1, 2, 3. Man! Hey, how you been, old buddy? Where you been? Man, I ain't seen you around.
I was in Newark, John.
In Newark?
Yeah, I was on vacation.
Oh, wow.
Nice vacation.
He really had a hold on the kids his age from the Midwest, on just how they behaved, how hippies behaved then, how the guy who was at Woodstock and did the talking, you know, he just knew how to relate to them. And, but he had a great command.
Okay. Try this. Oh my God, this is the biggest Quaalude I've ever seen.
I went to see Lemmings, which I believe was playing at the Village Gate. During the course of the evening, this guy came on stage that was just unbelievable. And that was John. And he was just amazing. It was a very talented group that was doing the show to begin with. But he was just great. And so after the show, we went backstage, and it was like, oh, we were going to go out to dinner. And in my mind, I had made a decision. I mean, there was Chevy Chase, who I'd never seen before, who was cute and talented. And then there was this sort of heavy-set guy that was, I don't know, he had a spark in him that was amazing. And so I said, let's go with the fat guy.
During Lemmings, that's the first time I met John. I knew nothing about acting on a stage. I was hired because I could play the drums and the piano. They needed people who could play two instruments and also be funny. And I was pretty bad, really. I got pretty good as the show went on at some things. He was clearly the star and the best improvisatorial guy there.
John and Judy stay in New York when Lemmings tours. She works for the National Lampoon magazine, while he's put in charge of another Lampoon project, the National Lampoon Radio Hour.
I met him at Second City in Toronto, and he came up to raid the show to grab people for his radio endeavors down here. John grabbed Gilda and came down and did a National Lampoon Radio Hour, and Bob Tischler and Paul Schaefer and, you know, Ivan Reitman and Bill Murray, and there you have the essential struts, pillars, and crutches of the American comedy industry as we have it today. And John was like one of these cohesive forces bringing it all together, you know?
Listen, Biography, I just want to say right now before we start, you know, that last time I was here, you know, I was real drunk, you know. Right. I was blasted, you know.
You were, yes.
So I just want to say I apologize for getting so drunk and,
that's okay.
you know, calling you a wad and everything and throwing up on you and calling you towel head and stuff,
all right.
you know.
That's okay.
But, you know, I was drunk, you know, and
I know.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry everybody out there, you know.
Well, that's Mr. Baker, Mr.
And I got a present for you, too. Somebody tell you how I feel about you.
That is so nice.
Here it is. This is a first pre-mixed, pre-measured disposable douche for you.
Goodness gracious.
That's right.
Merci.
That's how I feel about you.
It smells good.
Yeah.
I like that very much. Yes, my wife Peter.
Really? You're my only douchebag friend.
The 19-year-old perfect master, who was basically a Midwestern kid who was a guru and preached the philosophy that you would expect from a Midwestern kid. And that was pure John.
Radio Hour and Lemmings give John much needed exposure, but his career languishes. He even acts in a sketch called Supervision for PBS, his first TV appearance. But basically, he waits for something to happen.
Make 'em Laugh Week continues tomorrow with Gilda Radner, Steve Martin on Thursday, and Sid Caesar on Friday.
Himes understands that the simple of fine merchandise available anywhere. High quality, great service, unique products at wholesale prices. Come see us this weekend. We're right off 101. Take 3rd Avenue West, go left on Humboldt, then left on 10th to Amphlett. Manu Imports, 980 South Amphlett in San Mateo.
A&E's Biography continues with the life of John Belushi.
15 minutes before the first Saturday night show in 1975. I was running someplace, and here was this guy who I had met maybe for a second, and Craig Kellum, who was the associate producer, was sitting with him. And he says, "Come here." He says, "Should I sign this contract?" Which was the NBC contract. I said, "Of course you should." He said, "Well, before I sign it, will you manage me?" I said, "Well, what do you think?" He said, "Well, you handle Lorne, right?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Then you got to handle me." Then he signed the contract. That's how I met John. I had no idea for a year that he was a big hit.
My writing duties on the show were really quite separate from any interests that John and I had, you know. And also, we weren't really a team when we got to Saturday night, and I don't think when it was all over from the show we were perceived as a team. It was only from the movies and the Blues Brothers, you know, that team thing happened.
Danny and John, they were almost a perfect duo. I say almost because nothing's perfect, right? I mean, but they are a perfect example of you cannot sit down with pen and paper and create the perfect duo. They just happened to be on the same show. They just happened to click. They just happened to go on and say, hey, let's do a song on stage. All right, hat and shades. All right, we're the Blues Brothers now. I mean, things just happen.
We used to tease John about the way he wrote, because John would have things like, John would have written something on this. And he would take it out of his pocket, and there would be an idea written on this, you know, and then he would elaborate it into some wonderful piece of comedy.
But he couldn't physically write. He wasn't, you know, part of being a writer is physically able to form the little letters and consonants. Looked like some ransom note from Bruno Hauptmann.
To me, you know, who was a magazine writer for the Lampoon, I thought of writing as putting a piece of paper in the typewriter and typing. Well, John certainly was a writer. He was never that kind of a writer. He was finding, you know, matchbooks in his pockets with ideas on them kind of writer.
At one time in the National Lampoon, he tried to get a job as a writer, and he'd written this piece, and this is how he'd do it. He'd say, listen, I got this piece here, and wait a minute, this is it. Wait a minute, this is it. And he'd written it all on a napkin with like thing, and he thought that's what writing was, you know, just, wait a minute. I got it.
Well, he was getting paid to be himself, which of course is something we all like to do. And I'm sure that his humor was very cathartic for him, just as it is for, or should be for anybody else who is being paid to be funny.
I always liked the thing that wouldn't leave. Judy and I both fought to keep that one in the best of Belushi, and I think we're glad we did. I think that's pretty fun.
Soon, John receives movie offers too. The first is a small role in the Jack Nicholson film Goin' South, most of which never makes it to the screen. But at least John gets to ride a horse, pleasing his father Adam, a lifelong Western fan who joins him on horseback. On New Year's Eve, 1976, John and Judy are married. They honeymoon in Colorado, then head back to New York and the TV show.
What's the title of this movie?
Animal House.
Animal House.
Nice.
Animal House.
Movie.
Come opening August 1978.
Big smiling.
Animal House is shot over 4 weeks in late 1977, with the laughs on location rivaling those that make it to the screen.
Now the count comes behind you, grabs you like this, picks you up, and rams your head into the wall, right, repeatedly, right? Caving this whole side in, and the brain sort of is exposed. It's a cow's brain. Don't
I have a double for that? Or?
No, you got it. It's close up. You got to do it. It'll be like concrete or something.
All right.
So then the makeup guy comes in, takes this half of your head off, so the brain's exposed, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, so we can actually see.
That I can do. Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of a role is this for you? I understand it was written pretty much for you. Is that true?
I think every role was written for me.
The part of Bluto was written for John Belushi, and the part of Bluto is interesting because it was very clear after meeting John and dealing with John that the movie actually worked out. You could look at that film as setups. And there are many stories going on. It's a real ensemble piece, and there's a lot of fine actors. But it's great for John in that it has terrific entrances and exits for Bluto. Bluto sort of comes on, is charming and funny, and gets off. You know, it's a great part.
See if you can guess what I am now. I'm a zit. Get it?
Over the summer of 1978, Animal House becomes the top-grossing comedy in movie history. Combined with Saturday Night Live, the fame energizes John, but he chafes at the pressure that comes with it.
The Saturday Night Live experience was so alien to normal life that people became so famous and so, you know, I mean, to have enough money to eat was such an amazing shock after being in New York really starving for, you know, a few years, and in Chicago too. That fame thing, like when they first came out to California, I was in California when they came back after the first season of Saturday Night Live, and they were so different. Dan and John, I was like, I'd known these guys already a long time, and I was like, oh boy, what has happened here?
You know, if we take off for a day in New York and go, and he would say, okay, this is how you go around town without being recognized. And he'd put his collar up and put a little cap on, and he said, the way you hold your body, just the way you move, and you don't make eye contact, this is the way people never notice you. You know, you hide from him. And it would be great, because we would walk through, and people just wouldn't see it was him. He said, if I want to be noticed, you know, and they would like take the hat off, and then like people would flock and run across the street.
He would just say that, you know, people don't understand how tough it is. You know, it's about my parents especially, you know. They just don't understand. They don't understand what I have to go through. They just don't.
What do you mean?
Well, they always wanted his time, you know. They always wanted to, they go, why doesn't he call? Why isn't he there? You know, why doesn't he come and see us at Christmas like everyone else? And, you know, you just don't understand. They don't understand. They have no idea what my life is like.
Biography will continue in a moment here on A&E.
The newest way you can cure athlete's foot.
Saw her as a comic original,
It's always something.
a shining star,
Never mind.
who blazed a trail of laughter until her career was cut short by tragedy.
People are still talking about her. She's alive still.
Gilda Radner. Part of Make 'em Laugh Week on Biography. Tomorrow on A&E.
MCI proof positive.
Well, you got the camera.
As an escape from the scrutiny of the public, John and Judy buy a beach cottage on Martha's Vineyard, an island off the coast of Massachusetts. The Vineyard is a haven for celebrities who mix comfortably with the stoic islanders. The Belushi house soon becomes a focus for casual, non-showbiz activity.
He loved being at home, though. It was always like, you know, after work, come on up. And I knew it was just to relax, you know, him and I hanging around, watching videos.
In the midst of everything else, the Blues Brothers become a surprise hit. Jake and Elwood Blues, created by John and Dan Aykroyd to warm up the Saturday Night Live studio audience, go on concert tour almost as a lark and find themselves a sensation.
We were shooting Animal House in Oregon. One night we went to hear a band, and it was this little guy who we thought he looked like Danny a little, and he played harmonica, and his name was Curtis Salgado. And afterwards we met him and talked to him, and John was very enthusiastic about his music, and he was very enthusiastic about blues, and someone new who wanted to learn, and so he and John just started, you know, rifling through blues tapes and playing and recording things and just listening to music, and that was sort of the beginning of Jake Blues.
It was the philosophy of, you know, these characters were rebels, they were, you know, bad guys, and kind of within a context. I mean, they weren't morally or evil or spiritually bad, they were just bad in terms of the law, and they had to stay straight, so that's where that came out of.
On his 30th birthday, the album went to #1. He was on the #1 television show, and Animal House was the #1 grossing comedy. And he would often later say that that was a difficult time for him. He didn't know, you know, he was high on his success, and he was unsure
what people wanted from him and what was going on and how to relate to people and all that for a while.
Suddenly, there are bumps in the road. 1941, a manic comedy about World War II, becomes John's and director Steven Spielberg's first disappointment.
Yeah, how dare John be in a movie that was not a hit? Come on, people. Not every movie is going to be a over the moon hit. That's why it's called a hit, because you have hits and misses. Now, me, personally, I thought 1941 was a jammed up mess, alright? Too many characters, too many storylines, back and forth. Me, personally, once again, would have preferred a WW2 comedy with John and Dan as the central characters with a central storyline, okay? Now, what that would be, I do not know at the moment, but I think that would have been a better movie. What do you guys think?
Then, Old Boyfriends hits theaters. John had shot the film before Animal House, but only now is it released. In it, John plays a dramatic role, frustrating his fans who expect him to be funny. And finally, his beloved grandmother Nena suffers a heart attack across the country. She clings to life until John arrives at her side.
Oh, Nana loved anything my kids did. Grandma was like, they could knock her down and jump on top of her and she wouldn't care. She just loved my children. She lived for my kids and they were just, John wrote one time that Nana was the soul of our family, and she was.
Once again, it's the Blues Brothers to the rescue, as Animal House director John Landis brings Jake and Elwood to the big screen.
When you think about it, it is outrageous to make a feature film where your two lead characters, you can't see their eyes for the whole movie. I don't think Danny ever did take his glasses off. But that moment when John takes his glasses off with Carrie in the tunnel, and that's a real classic Belushi, seductive, very successful, winning scene. And, of course, then Jake dumps her in the mud.
Let's go.
Take it easy.
John follows the Blues Brothers with Continental Divide as a Chicago reporter doing a story on a reclusive naturalist played by Blair Brown. It's a change of pace for him, a romantic comedy in the Tracy Hepburn mold in which the two opposites wind up falling in love.
I'm over you completely, by the way.
Oh, me too. Over you? Totally.
Entirely.
The subtlety and the nuance of John and Continental Divide is what I really appreciated. I thought that was, to date, his, for me, his best performance. I think it was the closest that he played to himself. And you really saw the warmth and the honesty of John,
In 1981, Neighbors, a comedy pitting an uptight suburbanite against the bore next door, with John and Dan Aykroyd cast against Image. But the film set is tense, stars and director are frequently at odds, and the finished product reflects the discord. John's career frustration infects his personal life. Friends anguish over his behavior. When he's working, John is in top form. But between projects, his energy takes him down dark alleys.
It was clear to everyone at that point that John had a physical problem with cocaine. And everybody that could have had access to him and that we knew about who would give him the stuff was, they just weren't on the island, or if they were on the island, it was just very clear that they weren't welcome if they were bringing that stuff. And John put out the vibe, too. It was like, I don't want to see it.
Now, Dan, over the years, has said that John was overweight, he was smoking too much, he was drinking too much, that if he would have been in better physical shape, he might have survived the 8-ball that ultimately killed him. Who knows? This biography here does not go into great detail about his drugs or the circumstances of the day, night he died, because this is not about that. This is about the man, the comedian, the husband, the friend. So I think this video did a great job of going into it, but not, smacking you with it, because there are plenty of other videos and books, magazine articles, even a crappy movie called Wired, which you should never ever see, that really does smack you with the dark side of his life.
When someone you love is screwing up, it's very hard to deal with. And very hard to deal with on many levels. I mean, when you're making a big movie and the practical reality of getting a shot and the practical reality of saying, will you stop? And he'd flash those baby, he's doing Belushi, look. When John passed away, my first reaction was one of great anger. I was furious with him, just furious with him, because I wouldn't see him anymore. And I just felt, how dare you do that to me? I was just furious, really angry.
I think, like a lot of other people, I was very angry. Angry at the waste, and in a way angry at the system, because I think the system, and by the system I mean the Hollywood system and the commercial television system, hold out aspirations and goals and temptations for people that are so far removed from anything that has to do with talent and worth and good work. And once you get into that syndrome, once you get into that world, you have to be almost insane to fight it, because everyone around you conspires to keep you in it.
I resent and resist any attempts by people to draw conclusions from John's death or to make judgments, or, it's true that John would probably, and those of us who are his friends would probably want people to be cautious. But, it didn't have to happen, but it did,
It's so funny. People have this view of John as Bluto, who smashes guitars and wears togas and had food fights. And John was, not like that at all. It was, most of the time, he was really very quiet and serious, and liked fine wine, and raised pedigree pussycats with his wife.
He was a great hugger, John. When he hugged you, you felt hugged.
I love John very much. I miss him. I talk about him more than I talk about live people.
I think that he was a very powerful figure of our time, and certainly not just a fine, fat comic actor. He was somebody that, when you think of this period of time, I think his name will always be mentioned and remembered.
John Belushi's life and death were controversial, and they spawned two quite different books. Bob Woodward's book, Wired, focused on the unhappy circumstances surrounding the drug overdose. Judy Jacqueline Belushi in Samurai Widow countered with a much warmer and more human portrait of the man she knew and loved. By the way, Judy is now remarried to a producer-writer named Victor Paisano. The couple is raising a family and enjoying life a little farther away from the fast lane. Perhaps in the end, what we will remember when we think of John Belushi will be the laughs and the good times. Now let's see what's coming up next on Biography.
She was loved the moment she first stepped into the spotlight. Now her brightness is sorely missed. Discover a story of brilliant joy, laughter, and sadness. Gilda Radner on Biography as Make 'em Laugh Week continues tomorrow on A&E.
I hope you'll join Peter Graves and me 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, here on Biography. I'm Jack Perkins. Thanks for watching.
Now you can own a video cassette of this program. Call 1-800-423-1212 and you will receive the program you've just seen for only $19.95 plus shipping and handling. Call 1-800-423-1212.
Do you believe in the death penalty? Bill Curtis takes a closer look at a hotly debated issue tomorrow on American Justice. Now, an American carrying a precious jewel is found dead in her hotel room. Inspector Morse leads the search for the killer in the A&E mystery movie. Next.
I suggest that you, yes you, stay away from this book and the movie based on it. They are crap, filled with crap and lies. All right, I have a video on my channel where Dan holds no punches back on how much he hates this book and the movie that was made from it. Stay away. Judy would pass away in July of 2024, but she had a husband and a family, so she had a happy ending, which is great, fantastic. She deserved it. She always helped to raise John's legacy, as did Jim and Dan and the rest of the cast and crews that he worked with. He was a great guy. He just got into drugs and it took his life, which that has happened a lot. But he was somebody who, if you were a good friend, he helped to make you a better person. What more can one ask for, right? Are you, yes you, a fan of actor interviews and biographies and things of that sort? Then check out my channel. I have quite a few up already, with more coming in the future. Now, what do I have coming up? Well, you, once again, you have to stay tuned to find out. So like this video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching. We'll see you later.